Hey, good people. We are still in chapter 2, but not too long. We have only 2 sections, this one and another one. We're in chapter 2. We're looking at operations with integers. And now we're going to talk about, since we're so familiar with negative and positive numbers, we're going to talk about graphing in the negative and positive and quadrants and stuff like that. All right, so let's talk about what's going on. So we're going to talk about quadrants. When you have an x and y axis like this, I'm trying to do this as straight as possible. Not too bad. So this is the y-axis right here, this vertical one, and this right here is the x-axis. What this does is it actually splits the coordinate plane into 4 distinct places, and each of those places are called quadrants. So we've got this guy here, which is quadrant 1, quadrant 2 over here, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. So what these quadrants, each of these quadrants actually kind of have their own personality or their own flavor. And what you'll see is that in quadrant 1, all of the x terms and the y terms of any of the points you'd find in this section are going to be positive. So in quadrant 1, x and y are both positive. So both coordinates are positive. But now as we look, so both x and y are positive, but now as we look at quadrant 2, what do we recognize about the x and y coordinates? If I had an ordered pair, what do I notice about x and y? Hopefully you realize that x is always going to be negative, but y will be positive. So I've written that x is less than 0, which is negative, and y is greater than 0, which is positive. And obviously we're not talking about being on the line on either axis, because then if I were on the line, either x or y would equal 0. All right, let's take a look at the third quadrant. As I analyze the third quadrant, I recognize that the x values are negative and the y values are also negative. So I'd say that both x and y are negative. Which finally brings us to the fourth quadrant, pardon me. So we've got the fourth quadrant, and we need to figure out what qualities are here in the fourth quadrant. And I think you guys probably got this already, but I'm going to restate it or state it anyway. What we realize in the fourth quadrant is that, I'm just going to put quad 4, is that the x values are greater than 0, meaning positive, and the y values are less than 0. So you notice that each quadrant has its own flavor, its own type of ordered pair, so you want to keep that in mind when you're working. All right, let's take a look. So our first example is here. Okay, so there's the problem. So write the ordered pair names for each point. So here in this diagram down below, we see we have point K, point M, point J, and point L. So I'm going to write down, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, that's a little better. All right, so we're going to write the ordered pairs. So we've already located the letters, so I'm just going to write J, and I'm going to put the ordered pair that's associated with J. K, same thing, L, and M. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we do is we always know that X comes before Y in the alphabet, and so does it come before Y when we are dealing with ordered pairs. So we're going to look for J, find out where it is, count over to where it is along the X axis, and it's at -4, and then I'd have to actually get to J by going down to -3. So the ordered pair associated with the location of J is -4, -3. Let's look at K. We're going to move back along the x-axis so we can get right underneath K, and we're at -5. And to actually get to K, we'd have to go up to 2. So the ordered pair associated with K is -5, 2. Looking at L, we're going to go to the right along the x-axis, and we're going to go to the right all the way out to 2 to get above L in this case. So we're at 2, and then we're going to go down 2, which brings us to -2. Finally, M, we don't have to move anywhere along the x-axis because when we start at the origin, we're right underneath it. So we go 0 spaces along the x-axis, but we must go 5 up the y-axis in order to get to m. And so that's how we would find ordered pairs. Let's take a look at the next example. So in this example, we already have some of the information here to solve it. In this example, what we're doing is we're going to plot the point A and plot the point B. As you see over here in our diagram, to plot the point A, we first start at the origin, and it tells us to move, remember this is the x term and this is the y term, we're going to move back in the negative direction along the x-axis, back -2, and then down to -4. So here we have A, which is -2, 4. Similarly with B, we're going to start off looking for where our x location is. Our x location is at 0, so we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay right there. In terms of our horizontal movement, we're not going anywhere, but our vertical movement tells us to go up to 2, so our B value is right here. And that's how you plot points. Let's take a look at our next example. In this example 3, we're given the fact that the difference between John and Terry's golf score is 2. If we let x represent John's score, let's use this pen. If we let x represent John's score, and if we let me make this lighter, if we let y represent Terry's score, we're going to make a function table of possible x and y values. So we know that x is John's score and y is Terry's score, and we recognize that they are 2 apart. So x minus y, if we took the difference of the 2 scores, we get 2. All right, so with that in mind, what we'll do is we will choose some values for our x or for John's scores. And so for instance, if John's score were 2, Terry's score would have to be 0 in order for the difference to be 2 in order to satisfy this equation. So that gives us an ordered pair of 2, 0. Also, if John's score were, let's say, 1, Terry's score would actually have to be -1. Why? Because remember, we need to follow this function. So 1 minus a minus 1 is going to give me 2. And here's our ordered pair. If we continue on, John's score could be 0, Terry's score would have to be -2, and we get the resultant ordered pair. Here, -1, -3, and a -1, 3 is our ordered pair. And finally, -2, -4, our ordered pair is going to be -2, 4. So when we're asked to graph this, we're going to basically just take an XY axis and we're going to plot these points. And when we do that, we get the following. These points here show that the information that we were given falls on a beautiful line, so this gives me some indication as to what kind of an equation this is. This function is a linear function or a linear equation. So we have a linear function relationship here. Okay guys, that's it for us today. I look forward to seeing you in class. One more section and we'll be done this chapter, so start looking forward to planning when you're going to take the test. I'll talk to you guys very soon. Bye-bye.